The night my sister let me burn, she was already dialing his number. I know that now. I didn't know it then. Not when the smoke was filling my lungs, not when I was screaming her name from the second floor, not when I looked out that window and saw her standing in the driveway, watching. Still, calm, like she was waiting for something to finish. I died in that fire, that part is real, but what nobody expected, what she never expected, is that I came back. Same body, same face, same name, but everything I didn't know before, I know it now. Every lie, every deal, every whispered conversation she thought I'd never hear. It all came back with me, burned into my memory like a second skin. And this time, I didn't cry. I didn't beg, I didn't call, I just turned off my phone, walked away, and let her keep believing Shed won. Because the most dangerous thing I could do to a woman like my sister wasn't to fight her. It was to disappear and let her destroy herself trying to figure out why I was no longer afraid. She has no idea what's coming, but you will if you're new here. Subscribe. You do not want to miss where this goes. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before the fire, before the rebirth, before I understood what my sister really was. Our mother died when I was 9 and Nadia was 11. She left us a house, a small savings account, and a jewelry box that she made me promise to never open until my wedding day. I kept that promise. Nadia never forgot that box existed. Growing up, I thought Nadia was just difficult. Moody, a little cold. I made excuses for her the way younger siblings do. Told myself she was still grieving, still adjusting, still figuring herself out. When she snapped at me, I apologized. When she took credit for things I did, I stayed quiet. When she told me I was too sensitive, too emotional, too much, I believed her. That was my first mistake. I spent 15 years believing everything she told me about myself. Then came Daniel. I met Daniel at work. He was kind in a way I wasn't used to. Patient, funny, the type of man who remembered small things. He remembered I hated cilantro. He remembered I was scared of elevators after getting stuck in one at 14. He made me feel like the things about me that Nadia called flaws were actually just me, and that me was worth something. We dated for 2 years. I was happy, genuinely, quietly happy. For the first time since my mother died, Nadia hated it. She never said it directly. That was never her style. Instead, she started showing up more, inviting herself to our dinners, texting Daniel separately. Just to check in, she said, asking me if I was sure he was right for me, if I wasn't moving too fast, if ID really thought this through. She planted tiny seeds of doubt dressed up as concern, and God help me, I watered every single one of them. Looking back, I can see the pattern so clearly it almost makes me laugh. Almost. The engagement was quiet. Just Daniel, me, and a simple ring Head saved 3 months for. I was going to tell Nadia that weekend. She already knew by Friday night. I still don't know who told her. But I remember calling her, excited, voice shaking, and she went silent for just a second too long. Then she said, "Oh wow, congratulations, I guess." 3 words that should have told me everything. 2 months before the wedding, there was a fire. It started in the kitchen. I was upstairs, asleep. The smoke alarm in the hallway had been broken for a week. ID mentioned it to Nadia twice, and Shed said Shed handle it. She never did. I woke up choking. The staircase was already gone. I got to the window, screaming her name, convinced she was still inside, that she needed me, but she was outside, standing next to Daniel. His hand was on her back, not comforting her, not pulling away from her, just resting there, like it belonged. I saw it for 1 second before the smoke took me under. And then I died. Here is the part that is hard to explain, so I will not try to explain it scientifically. I will just tell you what happened. I woke up, not at the hospital, not days later, not with burns and bandages and concerned faces around me. I woke up 2 years earlier, in my own bed, heart pounding, the smell of smoke still somehow in my nose even though the air around me was clean and quiet. My phone said it was a Tuesday, the same Tuesday I remembered from 2 years ago, the day before I first spoke to Daniel at the office coffee station. I sat up slowly, looked at my hands, looked at the ceiling. Everything was intact, everything was back, but I was not the same woman who had lived this life the first time. I knew what Nadia had done. I knew what Daniel was, and I knew exactly what was hidden inside my mother's jewelry box. The secret Nadia had been circling for 15 years. This time, I was not going to be the one who burned. The first thing I did that Tuesday morning was sit completely still for 10 minutes. Not crying, not panicking, just thinking. Because here is what I had learned from dying. You only get one real advantage in a second life, and that is patience. The old me moved on emotion. I forgave too fast, trusted too easily, and filled in the gaps with hope when I should have been paying attention. That version of me was gone. The woman sitting on that bed knew better. I got up, made coffee, and opened my notebook. I wrote down every name, every date, every moment I remembered that had felt wrong the first time, but that I had talked myself out of questioning. The broken smoke alarm. The way Nadia had started texting more frequently after I mentioned Daniel. The evening 3 weeks before the fire when I came home early and the house smelled like her perfume even though she supposedly hadn't been there. Every small thing that I had once dismissed as coincidence now looked like a step in a staircase. One leading directly to me trapped on the second floor while my house burned below. I closed the notebook, finished my coffee, and smiled for the first time. They had no idea I was already 10 moves ahead. The office that morning felt surreal. Same fluorescent lights, same bad printer that jammed every Thursday, same people who had no idea that the woman walking past them had already lived and died through the next 2 years of their lives. And then I saw Daniel. He was standing at the coffee station, laughing at something on his phone, and the first time around I had found that laugh charming. Easy, safe. This time I clocked his posture, the way he leaned, the ease in his face, and I felt nothing warm, just clarity. He looked up, smiled at me the way he had smiled at me the first time, that slightly too confident smile of a man who already knew he was good-looking. "You're the one from the 3rd floor, right? I keep seeing you in the elevator." Same line, word for word. The first time, I had blushed and stumbled over my own name. This time, I looked at him evenly, said, "I actually take the stairs," and walked away. I heard him laugh behind me, surprised. Good, let him be surprised. Let him recalibrate. The less access he had to me, the less information he could carry back to Nadia. Because yes, I already knew. He had not just happened to fall for my sister after my death. This had not been some tragic love story that bloomed in grief. Daniel and Nadia had a history that started long before the fire. I had just been too in love and too trusting to see what was directly in front of me. That evening, I went to see Nadia. She opened the door in her robe, surprised to see me. We didn't usually do drop-ins. I had always been the one who called first, scheduled things around her convenience, apologized for showing up unannounced. The old rules. I walked past her without asking and sat down on her couch. She stood in the doorway of her own living room, looking confused. "Is everything okay?" "I just wanted to see you," I said, smiling like everything was perfectly fine. She sat down slowly, watching me the way you watch someone whose behavior suddenly doesn't match the pattern you've memorized. We talked for an hour about nothing important. I was warm, I was relaxed, I laughed at the right moments. I gave her absolutely nothing to be suspicious of, but I was watching everything. The second phone face down on the kitchen counter. The slight hesitation when I mentioned work. The way her eyes moved to her bag when my name and Daniel's came up in the same sentence, even though I had brought him up casually, as if he were no one. She thought she was reading me. She had no idea I was reading her. I left that night with 2 things confirmed and 1 question burning. I had confirmed that Nadia was already hiding something. I had confirmed that she was nervous without understanding why, but the question, the one that was keeping me up at night, was about my mother's jewelry box, because I had gone to check it that morning. And it was already open and it was already empty. My mother's jewelry box had a false bottom. I know that sounds like something from a movie, but my mother was a practical woman who had survived a difficult marriage, a bitter divorce, and 20 years of building something from nothing completely alone. She did not trust banks with everything. She did not trust people with everything. And apparently, she did not even trust her own daughters equally. Under the false bottom, the first time around, I had found a folded document and a small brass key. I had never understood what they meant because I had never gotten the chance to investigate. The fire happened 3 weeks later. This time, the box was empty, cleaned out, not broken, not forced open, opened carefully by someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. The only people who had access to this house were me and Nadia. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, holding the empty box, and felt something cold move through my chest. Not grief, not even rage, just the clean, sharp sensation of finally understanding the full shape of something that had always been slightly out of focus. Nadia had not just wanted Daniel. She had wanted what was in that box. I needed to know what my mother had hidden. That meant I needed to find the original document without Nadia knowing I was looking. I started with our mother's old lawyer, a quiet man named Mr. Hargrove who had handled her estate when she passed. The first time I had lived through this period, I had never contacted him. There had been no reason to. But this time, I called his office on a Wednesday morning, gave my name, and asked if there were any outstanding matters related to my mother's estate. There was a long pause on the other end. Then he said, "Miss Reyes, I've been wondering when you would call." My heart stopped for exactly 1 second. He told me that my mother had left 2 separate arrangements. The first was the joint inheritance that Nadia and I both knew about. The house, the savings, split evenly. Standard, clean. The second arrangement was private, a separate trust, built quietly over 15 years, designated solely in my name, not Nadia's, mine alone. The trust was attached to a piece of commercial property our mother had purchased under a different name, a name neither of us had ever heard her use. The trust had been set to transfer to me automatically on my 28th birthday. I turned 28 in 4 months. The document in the jewelry box had been the only physical copy of the trust's access key, the one piece of paper that, if destroyed or hidden, could delay the transfer indefinitely while legal complications were sorted through, complications that could take years, complications that would give someone else time to contest, manipulate, or quietly absorb what was never theirs. I asked Mr. Hargrove if anyone else had contacted him about the trust. Another pause, longer this time. "Your sister called last week," he said carefully. "She said you had asked her to request a copy of your mother's full estate documents on your behalf." I kept my voice completely even. "I see. And did you send them?" "I told her I could only release them directly to you." She was not pleased. I thanked him, ended the call, and sat in my car for a moment with my hands resting in my lap. Nadia had not just stolen from me. She had been planning this for years, possibly since the moment our mother died. The fire was not impulsive. The fire was not even about Daniel. Not really. Daniel had been a distraction, a bonus, a way to isolate me, humiliate me, and keep me looking in the wrong direction, while she dismantled everything our mother had left specifically for me. She had used my love as a blindfold. And it had worked. The first time, I started the car, drove home slowly, walked inside, made dinner, watched television like a woman with absolutely nothing on her mind. But I was already building something Nadia would never see coming. And the most devastating part, she was going to help me do it, without ever realizing she was the one holding the shovel. I want to tell you about the week Nadia's world started cracking, and how she had absolutely no idea I was the one applying the pressure. It started with Mr. Hargrove. I met with him in person and had the trust formally documented, verified, and legally secured under a new private arrangement that Nadia could not access, contest, or even locate without my direct cooperation. I also asked him one quiet question before I left his office. If someone were to challenge this trust, claim it was forged, or that our mother was not of sound mind, how long would that process take? He looked at me carefully. "Are you expecting a challenge?" "I am expecting everything," I said. He nodded slowly and told me to make sure I had witnesses. People who knew my mother. People whose testimonies could not be bought or pressured away. I already had a list. I had spent 2 weeks quietly reconnecting with my mother's oldest friends. Women Nadia had never bothered to maintain relationships with because she had never seen the value in people who had nothing immediate to offer her. That was always Nadia's blind spot. She only invested in people she could use right now. She never understood that loyalty built slowly is the kind that holds up in court. The second crack came from Daniel. I had been carefully distant with him for weeks, polite when necessary, forgettable when possible, but I had also been watching, And what I saw confirmed what I already knew from the first life. Daniel had been in contact with Nadia long before he ever approached me at that coffee station. Their connection was not new, it was practiced, so I did something the old me never would have done. I let him get close again, not because I wanted him, not because I had forgiven anything, but because a man like Daniel cannot resist a woman who seems to be slipping back into his orbit. His ego requires it, and an ego like his talks. 3 dinners in, he said something that he clearly thought was charming. We were talking about family and he said, "You know, your sister mentioned you used to be really dependent on people. Said it took you a long time to stand on your own." I looked at him over my glass, smiled softly, said nothing. But inside I noted the exact words. Your sister mentioned present tense relationship, active communication. He was still feeding her information, still reporting back. This dinner was not a date. It was surveillance dressed up as romance. I excused myself to the restroom and sent one text to Mr. Hargrove's office assistant. A date and time to begin the next phase of the legal process. Then I came back to the table, smiled at Daniel, and let him pay the bill. The third crack was the one that finally made Nadia panic. She called me on a Thursday evening, and I could hear it immediately. That specific tension in her voice that she always masked as casual conversation. She asked how I was, asked about work, asked, very carefully, if I had spoken to any of Mom's old friends lately. "A few," I said lightly. "Just catching up. You know how it is? Silence? Then which ones?" And there it was, the question she could not stop herself from asking. The one that told me she already knew something was moving beneath the surface. She just could not see it clearly yet. "Just old family friends, Nadia, why? No reason," she said too quickly. I've been thinking about Mom lately. That's all." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, softly, "Me too." We hung up. I set my phone face down on the table. She was scared. I could feel it through the phone line. That cold, creeping fear of a woman who has built everything on a lie and is starting to sense that somewhere, somehow, the foundation is shifting. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that I had already spoken to someone else. Someone whose existence neither of us had ever suspected. Someone who had known my mother's secret longer than either of us had been alive. And what they told me rewrote everything. Her name was Margaret. She was 71 years old, lived 40 minutes outside the city, and had been my mother's closest friend for over 3 decades. Not the kind of friend you post about. The kind you call at 2 a.m. The kind who knows where all the real things are buried. Margaret had been waiting for one of us to come find her. She told me that the moment I sat down at her kitchen table, she poured tea, looked at me with the steady eyes of a woman who had kept a secret long enough to be tired of it, and said, "Your mother always said you were the one who would come." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a letter in my mother's handwriting dated 8 years before her death. In it, my mother explained everything. The property, the trust, why it was left only to me. And the reason Nadia was excluded, not out of cruelty, but out of knowledge. My mother had discovered, years before she died, that Nadia had been quietly borrowing money from her accounts without asking. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. She had never confronted Nadia directly because she was still her daughter and she still loved her. But she had made a private decision to protect what was mine. She had seen exactly who Nadia was. She had just hoped she was wrong. The letter ended with one line that I had to read 3 times before it fully landed. "If you are reading this, my love, then she found the box before you did, and that means she has already shown you everything you needed to see." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. My mother had known, even in death, she had been 2 steps ahead. She had left me not just an inheritance, she had left me a roadmap. And Nadia, in her greed and her arrogance, had followed every single step of it perfectly, and walked herself directly into the consequence my mother had designed years before either of us understood the game being played. The legal process moved faster than Nadia expected because she had not anticipated that I had witnesses, documentation, and a letter in my mother's own handwriting that made every one of her claims dissolve before they could be filed. Her lawyer called mine on a Friday afternoon. By Monday, she had no case. The property transferred to me on my 28th birthday. exactly as my mother had arranged. Daniel disappeared from the picture the moment the money was no longer a question mark. That told me everything I needed to know about what he had actually been waiting for. He sent one text, a weak, poorly worded explanation that I did not bother reading past the first sentence. I deleted it and made coffee. Nadia called me the night everything finalized. I let it ring twice, then answered. She did not yell, she did not cry. She just said, quietly, "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I said. "And Daniel?" "Was never mine," I said. I figured that out early. Another silence, longer, heavier. Then she said, "I thought she loved me the same," and I understood in that moment that this was the real wound under everything. Not the greed, not the manipulation, not even the fire. It was the belief that our mother had chosen me over her, that she had been measured and found lacking by the one person whose opinion had mattered most. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "She loved you, Nadia," I said. "She just knew you." I hung up, set my phone on the counter, walked to the window and looked out at a city that had no idea what I had just walked through to get here. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel angry anymore. I felt something quieter than both. Something that felt like finally being able to breathe in a room that had always had too little air. My mother had protected me even from the grave. All I had done was show up and pay attention. And this time, this life, this second chance, I had not wasted a single moment of it.